and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. A historic move for the Baltics. Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania said on Sunday they had successfully synchronized their electricity systems to the European continental power grid. This took place one day after they severed decades-old power ties to Russia and Belarus. To discuss the significance of this move, I am joined here this evening by Victoria Voytsitska, energy expert, International Center for Ukrainian Victory. Good evening, Victoria. Delighted to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
So to begin, let me ask you about the process itself, because it took decades, right? Lots of prep. But does it mean that there are finally no more ties to Russia?
Indeed, there are no more ties. The process was long. As you correctly mentioned, it took over 2 decades for all 3 Baltic states to prepare themselves for the disconnection from the Russian grid. And it included lots of investments, billions of euros that were invested in building proper infrastructure, connections with other European countries, building the undersea infrastructure, etc. The preparatory work was really significant. And finally, physically, technically, all 3 countries became independent from Russia, which is of the most importance and significance, given the fact that all 3 countries became independent back and became part of European Union, became part of NATO, but still for decades they were dependent on Russia from the technical point of view with respect to the connection to the electrical grid. From the perspective of being dependent on Russian electricity itself and Russian energy resources, all 3 countries became fully independent from Russia back in 2022. However, all of those physical connections that you are showing right now were the last parts of the umbilical cord that was holding all of those 3 states dependable from Russia and its moods, its behaviors, its ways of treating their own neighbors. And I'm really glad that it happened. I remember when I was a member of the parliament from 2014 till 2019, I was visiting those 3 countries and we were discussing the importance of disconnecting from the Russian energy grid from geopolitical point of view, from the security point of view. And Ukraine was actually in the front line of this endeavor. We disconnected from Russian grid back in 2022, just a couple of days before the start of full-scale invasion. And if we didn't, who knows whether we would be so successful in actually being able to fight back.
Right, so Russia can no longer blackmail other countries with the power aspect. This is what Kaja Kallas also mentioned. But for Russia, the decoupling, right, means that its Kaliningrad exclave, located between Lithuania, Poland and the Baltic Sea, is cut off from Russia's main grid. So it's leaving it to maintain its power system alone. So how will that look like and what response can we expect from Russia?
Well, first of all, Kaliningrad is absolutely well prepared to survive as an energy island, so to say. So they have enough of their own electricity generating capacities. They are not dependable from Russia, the main part of Russia, for the supply of electricity. They have their own thermal power plants. They have their own gas storage facilities, which they can use then to power the thermal power plants. So we shouldn't worry about Kaliningrad. They will survive easily without actually having any access to the Baltic states. What we have to be aware of is that by disconnecting from Russia, those 3 Baltic states have demonstrated their readiness to survive with the help of other neighbor states and neighbor countries. And here comes really a risk factor of being dependent from countries like Finland, and the supply of electricity that is being provided through the undersea cables. And we know, especially during the last 12 months, we've seen numerous attempts of causing major damage to those parts of critical energy infrastructure, which should be finally protected in a proper way in order to avoid the disruptions and the sabotage that
the Navy
Russia
is
trying
protecting, right,
to
these
create.
cables now, yeah, because, right, now the cables are being protected, right, by special Navy units.
In a way, yeah, to a certain extent, not fully. Lots of more actions should be taken, like certain equipment should be installed on those cables, and additional physical protection should be provided. And by the way, Ukraine can be one of the examples of how to really prepare well for any possible attacks on critical energy infrastructure. We've had our own experience that we're happy to share with our neighbors and EU countries in order to really be ready for any possible sabotage.
Right. I mean, it seems that the Russian sphere of influence, when it comes to lately the power aspect, is shrinking, right? But also to other aspects. But my question is: are we expecting any reactions, any hostile reactions, acts of sabotage? You've already mentioned that that's a possibility, but perhaps other actions from Russia in response to that, to what has been happening.
When it comes to Russia, one can actually predict lots of different ways of how Russia can try to really cause pain to its neighbors as a result of retaliation, or as a result of being unhappy by the fact that three countries became independent from them. And yes, sabotage is part of it. We might see again attacks on the undersea cables infrastructure, but most importantly, look at what Russia is doing with respect to Ukrainian energy infrastructure and critical assets. They are using drones, and they are attacking parts of the infrastructure that causes certain blackouts in certain regions and negative consequences. Will they do the same with respect to Baltic states? Might they do it? Yes, they might. Will they do it? When they will do it? It's a question mark. I don't think that we will see retaliation for the fact of disconnection immediately, but we should be prepared, and NATO states should be prepared well in order to protect their assets from the possible attacks that might be of the different ways and kinds from Russia.
Right. I mean, security is something that money can't buy, but you've already hinted at it, and I wanted to explore that a little further. I mean, the costs of really this decoupling, of conducting this decoupling. What were the costs? How significant were they?
Well, the costs were in the magnitude of billions of euros, so not tens and hundreds of billions of euros. If I'm not mistaken, the overall budget was around 1.5 billion euros. But the most important part, again, I want to stress your attention on the fact that after disconnection, Baltic states, and not just them, but also other NATO member countries, they have to review their existing energy infrastructure, their critical energy infrastructure with respect to being ready for possible attacks, hybrid attacks, not just cyber attacks that have been happening already. And Ukraine is one of the examples. Before the full-scale invasion, we first had experienced major cyber attacks on our energy suppliers. The same can happen with respect to European countries, NATO members. Physical attacks, not necessarily in form of missile attacks, but drone attacks that could be sent from the middle of nowhere, and you don't need to have an army standing right at your door, but such attacks might happen. So that's what I was explaining to Mr. Kubilius when I met him, by the way, a year ago, that security of the energy assets in Europe is important. But now it's time to create an action plan for building strong protection from possible physical attacks on such assets. So that should be the priority for European Union, for NATO, and I hope after the disconnection from Russian grid, that will be the next step, and the investments will be made into the protection of such assets first of all.
Right, and EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, herself being from Estonia, called this switch a victory for freedom and European unity. Do you agree with this statement?
100%. As I mentioned, all three Baltic states, they got their independence and they've been joined European Union, they joined NATO, but they still remained dependent, physically dependent from Russian grid and from Russia, therefore. So that was the last point, the last step that those countries finally made in order to become fully and truly independent from Russia, which is actually, it's a great move. It's a right move, a strategically correct move. And I'm sure that those countries will only benefit from those actions.
Right, of course. And how does that sort of, can we see a Ukrainian angle in all of this? Because you've been mentioning Ukraine a few times, and I just wanted to perhaps take a closer look at what could that mean for Ukraine, perhaps showing that Europe is so united and stronger.
Absolutely. So first of all, we need to recognize that Ukraine is on the path to joining European Union. It has the candidacy status, but most importantly, before even getting the candidacy status, we were working really closely with the European Union, especially with regards to becoming a real partner in energy sector. And back in 2022, we were ready and we actually disconnected from the Russian grid and connected simultaneously to European grid. And it was happening, frankly speaking, in a very speedy move, and lots of skeptics were saying that it is impossible to achieve such results within such a short period of time, that Ukraine would need to live by itself for quite a number of months before connecting to a European grid. But we succeeded. And we see the same results with the Baltic states. So we are already part of a European Union energy family. So we are already being part of the greater family of energy companies and energy grid operators, which is good. It's great. It's really a positive signal that we can already at this level work together and be efficient partners for all the members of the ENTSO-E, this energy union. And before Ukraine unfortunately lost a significant amount of electricity generating capacity, we were not exporter of electricity to European Union, and the Baltic states were also benefiting from cooperating with other European countries. So
Victoria Voytsitska, we have to wrap up here. Thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely,
much appreciated. And thank you for watching. World Talks will be back with more shortly. Please stay tuned.